Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
Tonight's broadcast brought to you by NatureBox. NatureBox, shipping great-tasting, healthy snacks directly to your door. Forget the vending machine and start snacking smarter with healthy, delicious stuff like dark cocoa, almonds, and more. Support this podcast by ordering a free NatureBox sampler right now at naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. That's naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. Still not 100% after last week, but feeling much, much better. Thanks so much for your patience. It's funny, after our show with CJ Werleman last week, my email inbox, of course, spiked. Many people who had a real problem with Republican atheists said, hell yeah, great show. Republican atheists, a few of them sent protests that said they were not well represented. Libertarians were very pissed and said, please have somebody else on. It's funny when you talk politics, everybody circles the wagons. I'm not talking politics on this show for a while, okay? I'm done for a while. I need a break for a while. I have in my hands a letter I got in the mailbox today. It was addressed to current resident, one of those uniquely personal correspondences. Well, you know, normally I'm thinking it's junk mail, right? So I open it up, and there's a letter, and it says this. Dear neighbor, I wanted to speak to you personally, but was not able to reach you at home. Well, of course. I mean, address it to current resident, right? I'm therefore taking this opportunity to share this positive view of the future with you. It seems that every day, life is getting harder and harder. More people are becoming stressed from trying to make a living, raise a family, and just deal with all the complex issues in our world. It's been my experience that the Bible provides much comfort, such as the scripture found at Philippians 4:6-7, which says, let your petitions be made known to God, and the peace of God will guard your hearts and your mental powers by means of Christ Jesus. Now, this isn't on any kind of letterhead. It's just a white sheet of paper with sort of a typewritten, very anonymous-looking typewritten letter on it, about 3 paragraphs, and a copied signature, Carl somebody, and a local phone number. The bottom paragraph gives it away. This is a worldwide campaign to help all people become aware of the wonderful future that the Bible tells us we can have. Perhaps we may be able to speak in person someday soon. If you have any questions, please feel free to come and visit the Kingdom Hall. Aha! And then I see a brochure. And it says this. It's got a cell phone with a finger on the front of it. On the front of the brochure it says, where can we find answers to life's big questions? Are the answers in science? ? Philosophy? ? The Bible? ? And of course, it's all about the Bible. The Bible is providing answers to millions of people. JW.org. Now, it's obvious these people have no clue what I do. Or they at least would have personalized the letter. You who have rebelled against Yahweh, we have something special for you. Turn from your wicked ways. I don't know what their tack would have been. But anyway, I got this in the mail, and I just saved it because I thought it was kind of a fun way to open the show. It's amazing to me how often people in the faith, whether it's Christianity or the Mormon faith, Jehovah's Witnesses, whatever, a Bible-based religious system, come to non-believers like me, and they pitch the Bible. Because the vast majority of non-believers that I know actually know the Bible better than those who are pitching it. And you can tell because if you begin to ask them specific questions about Bible stories that are not necessarily taught at Sunday church, and you see their face go blank and the eyes go a little bit wide, and that panicked sort of a disposition on their face, like, what? That's not in there. So then you go and you actually look it up and you show them the verse. Well, it doesn't matter what you say, or you took it out of context, or you're using the wrong translation. Let's talk about something else, please. I haven't prepped a whole lot for tonight. Honestly, I've been working on a whole bunch of stuff, much of it for the Humane Society. I did that video about Henry, the rescue dog, who has become part of our family. We've had him for 6 months now. And the Humane Society saw the video that I produced about his rescue and how he's become this amazing part of our little family unit here. And they've asked me to do kind of a larger video for a series of rescues in the state of Oklahoma, and me being a total pushover when it comes to animals and believing in what the Humane Society does, and I do, I said, okay. So I'm working on a piece for them, and I've been eyeball deep in that for the last several hours. And I'll tell you, it hurts the heart, man. You hear about what people do to animals and the conditions that they're in. It's a burden on my shoulders. I just feel heavy, man. Of course, the happy ending is that people are going in, not just through the Humane Society, but through other organizations, and they are being a happy ending, being a solution to these horrible problems. And I'll tell you, for my part, I'll never buy another pet. I'll never go to a pet store to buy a dog or a cat or something, ever again. Ever. There are too many needy animals out there, and that's become kind of one of the causes that's near and dear to my heart. I've been in a charity thing probably for the last year almost. We're above $12,000 on our $10,000 goal for the Foundation Beyond Belief. That deadline doesn't even hit till the end of September. We have a whole month to go. And we're already $2,000 up and still cooking. So now I'm thinking, well, will we hit $20,000 by the end of September? Wouldn't that be amazing? So thanks to everybody who's been a part of that. And if you want to be a part of that charity event as well, you want to give a few bucks to that. We're calling it a wedding gift beyond belief. Essentially, Natalie and I got married. We asked you to give our wedding gift to a wonderful, worthy, secular charity called the Foundation Beyond Belief. And I'll go back and put that link in the description box of this show. Looks like Matt Dillahunty, Aaron Raw, and I are going to be going to Australia in March of 2015. They wanted to bring the Unholy Trinity Tour to Australia. So they contacted us and they said, would you be interested? And it's going to be, I think, a 2-week run. I think we're going to go down there and do at least 3 cities, Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. I think they may do a debate or 2 with Matt. I'm not sure exactly what's happening yet. I don't know if they're sure what is happening yet. They're still exploring the possibilities. But they went ahead and set up a website for anybody who wanted to sort of let them know that they're interested in attending. You can go to unholytrinitydownunder.com, and there's a little form you can fill out. So if you live in the area and you want to be a part of something like this, gauging interest will allow them to know whether or not it's even viable to jump through all these hoops to make it happen. But the idea of visiting Australia is just unbelievable to me. It's something I've always dreamed of. Of course, I always thought I would end up going in the context of the Australian Open. I'm a tennis fan. I was like, oh yeah, we got to go see the Open. And it looks like this will be, a whole next level kind of thing. I'll get a chance to travel with some friends. I'm going to try to bring my family with me if possible. It's not a cheap ticket. It's freaking Australia. But, I'm going to try to make the most of it. If it all comes together, you'll be able to follow its progress right there on the website, unholytrinitydownunder.com. Did you see that story about the pastor in Texas who wants to ban all of these vampire books from public libraries because it's dangerous for children? His name is Philip Missick, and he has teamed up with a bunch of religious leaders in the area, and they've called on the Austin Memorial Library to pull every book they've got about vampires and demons and magical beings from the teen section. They say there's demons, there's magic, there's sexuality. Occultic stuff is in there, and we just can't have it. In fact, there's like 75 books that he wants pulled outright, specifically dealing with the occult. This, by the way, does include the Twilight series by Stephanie Meyer. And the whole time I'm thinking, have you picked up your Bible? Have you read the thing? We've got demonic activity, we've got mass murder, we've got rape, we've got infanticide, we've got possession, we've got all kind of craziness in regard to sexuality. It's just crazy. It's just a horror story. Have you opened that thing? Because if you're going to ban Twilight, you're going to have to ban the Bible. Anyway, don't hold your breath. I'm sure the library is going to do what libraries do and celebrate the written word rather than ban it or burn it or whatever these people have in mind. I've taken some heat this week. I did a short video response to that red ball-capped pastor, Joshua Feuerstein. Yeah, he irritates me as much as he irritates you. I totally get it. His cell phone videos have been seen by millions of people. I had somebody paste that into Facebook again this week. The one where he quote-unquote destroys evolution in 3 minutes. And I couldn't help myself. I had to go back and type in the rebuttal. Well, actually, he's wrong about this. He's wrong about his context of the word theory. He doesn't know what a scientific theory is. He's wrong in the context in which he uses the word accident. He's wrong about observed evolution. He's wrong about this. He's wrong about that. Here's some sources. And I got no response on the Facebook thread. They didn't delete it. It's still out there. And I didn't mean to embarrass this person, but you and I see so much of this stuff posted, and from time to time it's like a gentle correction is warranted. I think I would want to be corrected if I had gotten something wrong. If I'd posted something that was factually incorrect, rather than sit there with flop sweat all over me while everybody else knew it was bogus, I would want someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, look, this is not exactly accurate. You may want to fix it. And so I went in and made that response. And it was probably 6-7 paragraphs. And not a word. Anyway, Feuerstein did a fresh video where he challenged atheists $100,000 in cash reward if they could prove that God does not exist. Now, the funny part is he's gone on his social media pages and he's got like 700,000 Facebook subscribers, which makes you fear for the species, right? And he's pitching T-shirts and he's pitching this and that. Well, he's asked all of his people now to help him buy a RED digital camera. For those who aren't familiar with RED, it is a state-of-the-art film camera. It's a digital camera, essentially. It's what they use to shoot The Hobbit. I guess people complained about him doing cell phone video for all of his YouTube stuff and his Facebook stuff. Well, rather than do what you and I would do, which is to pick up a standard, $70 webcam that shoots 1080p, even a 4K camera, you could get relatively inexpensively in the grand scheme of things. But no, Josh Feuerstein has decided the next step up from his cell phone video is to get a RED digital camera and be like you and I, being 16 and getting our first car, and it was a junker, and we decided our next one was going to be a Lamborghini. It's just terrifying. It terrifies me as a video producer, the idea that this kind of beautiful technology would be in the hands of somebody like Joshua Feuerstein. It's just horrifying. So anyway, we all smell a rat. Here's a short soundbite from his video, give you a taste of what he was doing.
What's up, Josh Feuerstein here. So I'm here to issue the $100,000 atheist challenge to anybody that could provide me proof or evidence that God does not exist. I think it's rather ridiculous that there's been people for a long time that have said that God does not exist, and yet they're unarmed because they have zero evidence and zero proof. How would that ever hold up in a court of law?
How would it ever hold up in a court of law? By the way, where do they send people off to these pastor schools to teach them to talk like that? I mean, this guy wasn't talking like this in high school. He's mimicked some pastor cadence somewhere, because those of us at least here in the American Christian community, know some pastor or have heard some pastor who talks just like that, Here was my response to Josh Feuerstein. It runs about 10 and a half minutes. Hey, I'm Seth Andrews. I'm host of the weekly radio podcast, The Thinking Atheist. I'm a former Christian. I was a believer for 30 years. I was a Christian broadcaster for over 10 of those years before I finally walked away from my faith in 2007. Now, normally I don't take the time to respond to religious videos that are out there. There are so many of them. I mean, thousands upon thousands of them, and most of them are echoes of previous religious messages that are out there. And frankly, in the face of religious claims, there's already a wealth of wonderful, credible, vetted, peer-reviewed information out there for anybody who cares to look. But there's a young pastor. His name is Josh Feuerstein. You've probably seen him on social media. He's got the close-up camera, the beard, the red ball cap. He's been getting so much attention lately that I felt like a response to his latest video was appropriate. Now, Feuerstein has gone online, and he's made a challenge, specifically to atheists, of a cash reward of $100,000 to anybody who can prove that God does not exist. Josh, science called and said, "You're doing it wrong." Scientists and non-scientists alike, with any cursory understanding of the burden of proof, know that you don't start with anything and everything that cannot be disproven. That's not how science works, Josh. Look, by that standard, fairies exist. The boogeyman exists. Plush, time-traveling teddy bears in outer space exist. Prove they don't exist. Look, if we're starting with anything and everything that cannot be disproven, then we are forced to give equal scientific credence to the theory that our universe is nothing but a giant snow globe that right now is perched on the mantelpiece of Father Christmas. Prove it doesn't exist, Josh, for $100,000. Now, come on, skeptics are not showing up in the court of public opinion and demanding that no God can exist. That's not what we're about. We're simply operating like a judge or a jury would in a court of law. We're entertaining a positive claim, which is what you're making, right, Josh? You're making a positive claim about a specific deity and holy book and faith. And we are saying, fine, show us the evidence. And if the burden of proof is not met, we have no choice but to dismiss the charges. That's all that's happening here. We atheists, we non-believers, are simply starting at the null position. And we're examining all claims brought to us, not just religious claims, any claims. And we're vetting those claims against the evidence to see if there's any merit to them. We're not angry at God. We don't want to become God. We're not on a mission to kill God. We're not going through a rebellious phase against God. It doesn't work like that. We just live in a world which is obviously governed by natural laws. And we see apologists and pastors like you come to us and make a supernatural claim. And we respond by saying, fine, provide credible, measurable, peer-reviewable, scientific evidence for your claim. Bring it. Show us the money. Or we have no choice but to dismiss the charges. Now, on the issue of morality, you brought this up in your most recent video, where you said outright that the only reason that an atheist would know that the horror of the Holocaust was wrong was because we borrowed your God's objective moral standard. I am so tired of apologist blowhards tossing out the Holocaust and the Hitler grenade in an attempt, subtly in your case, in an attempt to align atheists with the most vile and horrible elements of human history, right? And it's ludicrous to assert that a human being would not know that mass murder was wrong simply because they didn't have your invisible friend tapping them on the shoulder to tell them so. In fact, it is offensive to good, upstanding, moral people all across the planet. Now, you say morals come only from your God, not any God, but a specific God. You are a Christian. You're talking about the Christian God. Try this one on for size. I once asked Bible-believing Christians in a survey, kind of an informal survey, look, if God appeared to you the way he appeared to Abraham in the Old Testament, and he commanded you as an act of obedience to take your child out, drive a knife into their heart, and sacrifice them, would you do it? And the vast, vast, vast majority of responses I got back from Christians said absolutely not. No way would I ever lay a hand of harm to my own child. In fact, many admitted outright they'd rather receive punishment from God for their disobedience than to hurt their child. Now, why do they respond this way as Christians? Well, they are obviously operating from an evolved moral system that naturally recoils at the idea of harming a child or killing another human being. It's a moral system that stands apart from your supposed good book and the deity which they claim is responsible, which you claim is responsible for the objective moral standard. By the way, they also prove that they're much more moral than God. They're hugely more moral than any being who would command a parent to kill their child for its own pleasure. Now, Josh, you like to use the word accident or accidental when you're talking about evolution, when you're talking about the Big Bang and the cosmos, a hugely intellectually dishonest way of describing life and our planet and this universe, which is an amazing symphony of random, yes, random, and measurable and predictable phenomenon. And honestly, if you insist that everything exists because your God created and fine-tuned it just for us, I've got some questions. Ask God why the whole of legitimate evolutionary biology only sees evidence of evolution. That's all we see. Common ancestry with living things, both animal and plant, verifiable down to our DNA as we decode the genome. A universe measurable at about 13.5 billion years of a natural world governed by natural laws. Ask your intelligent designer about some questionable design decisions that have been made, like earthquakes that cause tsunamis that wipe out 250,000 people in a single day, redundant DNA, a sun that gives off harmful UV radiation that gives people cancer. Vestigial organs and limbs, explain those. Pelvises found in whales. Human embryonic tails. Useless insect wings. Deep-sea fish that have eyeballs but cannot see, are completely blind. Flightless animals with wings. Wisdom teeth. The list goes on and on and on. In fact, while you're chatting it up with God, ask him why he bothered to give men nipples. Always wondered about that one. And the biggest question that I would like you to ask God on my behalf, by the way, a God who I consider to be the hide-and-seek champion of the universe. Why, with eternity in the balance, heaven and hell in the balance, here in the year 2014, the information age, why has God been so ineffective at proving himself to humanity that right now a full 2/3 of the planet worships either somebody else or nobody at all? Why is the only written instruction we have the product of anonymous authors who were working 1,400 years before the invention of the printing press? Why would an omniscient God, a God who knew everything past, present, and future, continue with a plan that he foreknew would fail and result in the damnation of billions? He's omnipotent, right? He can do anything. He could have come up with a better plan. And finally, why is God, the most powerful being in the universe, relying on a YouTube pastor to set the rest of us straight? This is not an ad hominem against you. This speaks to method. It's a legitimate question. If God really cares about me, and he can talk to me the way he talks to you, why am I stuck listening to you? Why are any of us listening to you? Personally, I have my suspicions. I think you are a true blue Christian. I think you're a true believer. But I also think you're enjoying the attention, and you may be more interested in the notoriety than anything else these days. That's another reason I debated doing this response video and giving you even more attention. Those of us who are familiar with concepts like branding get it, right? The close-up camera, the beard, the bald cap. People instantly recognize your stuff, and they are talking about you. You have effectively moved out of obscurity and in some places become kind of a household name. And people are watching your videos by the millions. But it is important to keep this stuff in perspective, man. This is the internet, right? Cat videos have millions of views. Car crash videos have millions of views. Water skiing squirrels twerking has millions of views. Giggling babies elevator pranks. Freaking Justin Bieber has millions of views. And while there is no doubt you have tapped into this sort of lazy, hazy, casual Christian viewing public, Look, you're essentially preaching to an entire culture of people who thinks it's perfectly fine that God lets 14,000 children starve to death today while he's busy helping them find their car keys. That's your demographic, right? They've got a Bible in every room of the house and they lug it to church every single Sunday, but they have no idea what's in the thing, and they couldn't even tell you who wrote the book of Genesis, arguably the most important book ever written. That's your demographic. And there are some of us out here who simply hope that one day some of the people in your audience will come to the conclusion that they have a greater desire to know than they do to believe. They'd rather know than believe. They'll ask questions before they claim an answer. They'll reject faith and crave knowledge. They'll start getting their science not from pastors, but from actual scientists. Wouldn't that be something? That they'll accept hard evidence presented right in front of their faces, and they'll start thinking for themselves instead of relying on Joshua Feuerstein to spoon-feed them these empty calories of armchair theology and cell phone videos on the internet that contain bogus rewards to millions of people who should already know that you can't prove a negative. Look, a God who genuinely cared about us would have already proven the positive claim. He would have already proven that he does exist beyond a doubt. Josh, the world is waiting. Science is waiting for the real burden of proof to be met. That is essentially the rebuttal to the $100,000 claim. We'll see what happens. I don't expect anything on the rebuttal front. But it felt good. Sometimes I think it's a good thing to make sure that their reputation is out there, because if they're the only voices being heard, if they're the only ones being shared, if they are the only ones who are being given a moment in the spotlight to have these conversations, it means only misinformation is being spread. It means there's no counter argument to the poor argument in the first place. Some people say it's a waste of time. Don't give him any more attention because that's what he wants. No one's listening anyway. Why would you bother? And sometimes I agree, and sometimes I think, our reputation is warranted. Sometimes we need to go out and debunk false claims publicly, not because Feuerstein's listening, but because perhaps someone in his listening audience might be listening and paying attention enough to vet his lazy claims about what atheists are, what we think, what God is, what God isn't, and this bogus $100,000 challenge. The guy can't afford a red camera, but he can afford to pay us $100,000. It's just absolutely transparent. We'll hit your phone calls in about 60 seconds, but first, 2 words, people, just 2 words on tonight's show. Free snacks from our sponsor, Nature Box, giving you the chance to get free snacks. Now think about what you've been doing to satisfy the snack craving. Probably what I used to do, candy bars, potato chips. Candy bars, potato chips. Those little cookies in the vending machine that have a shelf life of like years because they're so stacked with preservatives and salt and who knows what else is in those things. Nature Box is providing a terrific and delicious and healthy alternative. So when you do grab something on the fly, you can do so without all the guilt. Nature Box snacks have 0 artificial ingredients, 0 trans fats, 0 high fructose corn syrup, with options for low sugar and gluten-free, tons of choices, literally hundreds of choices, like peanut butter nom-noms, baked sweet potato fries, dark cocoa almonds, or my current favorite, Kung Pao pretzels. I've been addicted to those for a month. And I want to give you the chance to try them out for free with a sample box that feature 5 of the most popular snacks at Nature Box. That's free snacks, and it's easy to start your free trial right now. Just log on to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. Stay full, stay strong, stay healthy, snack smarter, and get a free Nature Box sampler right now at naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. My first call on the switchboard, area code 208. Thank you for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, Seth. This is Kylie. How are you?
I'm well, Kylie. Thanks for calling the show. What do you want to talk about tonight? It's a freestyle show, so anything goes.
Well, I wanted to say thanks for the show that you did a couple weeks ago about mental health. That was awesome. I wish you would do some more on the same topic. I think it's something that's very needs to be addressed, especially from the perspective of atheism and how hard it is, I think, for people to get help that doesn't try to involve somehow some spiritual aspect, which is kind of what I was wanting to say, something, suggest maybe a show about dealing with addiction recovery too, doing it with resources that don't have to involve something spiritual like AA and those kind of things. There's always that spiritual aspect, which I think for a lot of people who, if you're atheist, it's not something that you necessarily want to be involved with. So I think that can be a barrier sometimes for people getting help. So.
Yeah. Well, we did a show a while back called Overcoming Without Religion that was along those lines, but I do agree the topic is ripe enough that it's probably something that we can and should address again, especially now that we have so many new listeners. I think we did Overcoming a year and a half or so ago. So, yeah, I'll make a note here. We'll see if we can maybe hit that before the year's up.
Yeah, I mean, because I've just recently started listening in the last 6 months. So, people that come on and haven't necessarily gone all the way back in the archives, so there's stuff that we haven't necessarily heard. So I thought that would be something that would be a good topic to go over.
Great
but
suggestion.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that and say thank you for all that you do and keep doing it.
Thank you, Kylie. Thanks for listening. You take care, all right?
You too. Bye.
All right, bye. I don't mind covering again a topic that we've covered before. Honestly, there's going to be some overlap. We've got brand new audience members who may not have dug, dozens upon dozens of episodes back into the archive. And quite frankly, I think some of these conversations are just good to have from time to time. I had an email in from Mike. He said, I've listened to your podcast and similar ones about raising a rational, free-thinking child. My kid's only exposure to religious gobbledygook has been the once or twice a year attendance at a laborious Catholic holiday mass to appease my in-laws. We've reared our boys on science books, Cosmos, and Dawkins' Magic of Reality. Our family has conversations about various religious beliefs and those of which we find quite odd. However, I still harbor an irrational fear that one of my kids will come home someday and declare themselves to be a believer. I mean, their buddies and school chums attend fun-time churches with all the get them while they're young, I've got a friend in Jesus party atmosphere activities. Worse yet will be the day they conform to some churchy BS because they've fallen for some youth thing with the WWJD wristband. Rationality falls apart when a boy succumbs to raging teenage hormones. Have you heard of a free-thinking parent having to deal with a kid suddenly becoming religious? Mike, it's funny you should bring that up. We did a show back in April, I think it was on the 22nd. It's titled, I Raised a Religious Child. It's not exactly what you're talking about, but it is a show about non-believers who were believers when they raised their children, and then they walked away from faith and became rationalists when they were adults, but their kids were already sort of well down this religious path. And it was an interesting show. We can probably cover again in the future, the fears of a parent having their children being unduly influenced by church, by religious institutions who are obviously hyper-targeting the young. We talk often about the 4 to 14 window, this critical age Catherine Stewart addresses in her book, The Good News Club, where they have to get these children at these ages because if you get them past the age of 14, 15, 16, they're just not going to buy what the church is selling. I did a whole speech years ago called Get Them While They're Young that talks about the tactics that the church uses to really go after young people, often without their parents' knowledge. I mean, it's insidious to see how, and I'll say this, the church believes that they are rescuing young people. They honestly think they have to save a generation. And that starts with the children. They believe that we are a world under attack by Satan. They believe that children are being attacked by Satan and their lives are being corrupted by all manner of stuff, be it film or literature, pop culture. It's like this pastor in Texas who's wanting to pull all these books out of public libraries. Well, I have a feeling he's probably working because he genuinely thinks that these books are conduits of evil that will negatively impact young children and infect a generation. And so the church comes out hard and heavy against these young kids. They're just going after them with all sorts of stuff. Pizza parties, they take them out to amusement parks. They bring rock bands in. They do what they call lock-ins where they've got them in there all night long and nobody can leave. And they have activities and games and prizes and so much fun. And, of course, at the end, there's usually some sort of an evangelical message, quite often followed by an altar call. Would you like to accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? I went to a church called Gracemont when I was in 7th grade. I remember they brought a magician in. They don't call him a magician in the church. He's an illusionist. And he came in and did probably 45 minutes worth of tricks. And he was pretty good. But at the end of his quote-unquote magic show, he spun all of this into, well, you know, this isn't real magic. But if you want to know something really magical, then you need to know the love of Jesus Christ. That's how they do it, that awkward, ham-handed segue into the Bible, into an evangelical message. And yes, he had an altar call, and people were given the chance to come forward and accept Jesus. That's how the church operates. So I understand your concern. We may cover it in a show coming up in the next several months as well. If enough people think we should do so, I'd be more than open to doing that. I had a message in from Luca, who said, I was born and raised in Australia in the early 70s to Catholic parents. My entire education was spent in Catholic schools. But by the age of 9 or 10, I'd abandoned any belief in God that I had, as it just didn't make any sense. God loves me so much that I have to be afraid of him? How does that make sense? So I gave it all up. I kept it to myself and didn't think on it anymore. I continued to call myself Catholic, if anyone asked, but I was a secret atheist. I grew up on a steady diet of comic books and TV, and I think it was that, combined with a steady stream of Star Wars, Star Trek, Superman, and the like, that I became a humanist, even though I didn't even know what that was. I wanted to be the hero, the good guy that does good things because a good deed was its own reward and someone for everyone to look up to. My dad was a laborer, and he'd be exhausted at the end of the day, so to spend time together, we'd watch TV. He was happy to let me watch anything I wanted, but when the news was on, he insisted on watching it. This is where my journey into anti-theism began. It seemed that every other night there was another war, or another hijacking, assassination, bombing, or massacre. It seemed to never end, day after day, month after month, year after year. I'd ask my father, why are they doing or saying that, Dad? 9 times out of 10, the answer would boil down to religion. My inner hero would cry out, why won't people stop them? Why would people follow a religion that tells them to do that? Now, you can't say that, son. People have a right to believe whatever they want. Not all religious people are like that, and you have to respect people's beliefs. Respect, tolerate, and be quiet. During primary school, Black September was assaulting embassies, and the Irish were arguing over who was the better Christian. Lebanese citizens were murdering each other with reckless abandon, and the Jonestown People's Cult had committed mass suicide, and I was told I had to respect, tolerate, and be quiet. When I started high school, 45% of my school consisted of Lebanese Catholics that had fled religious persecution in their 20-year civil war. The assassinations, hijackings, faith-healing deaths, wars, honor killings, suicide bombings continued. The madness rages on unchecked, but I was told I had to respect, tolerate, and be quiet. As the years rolled on, so does the death toll, the division, the bigotry, and the fear-mongering. In 2000, I became a father, and again in 2002. Both events are the 2 greatest moments in my life, and both are bracketed by 2 of the worst, 9/11 and the Bali bombings. Ask any parent, having children changes you. I would do anything to keep them safe, and when I see the children of others suffering or dying, my heart breaks for them. Why must I be quiet? Why do I have to tolerate this? Religion has driven some men insane. Why can't people see this for what it is? And what's worse is that these things happen so frequently that we've been desensitized to it. It's so mainstream that it's just like living next to the train tracks. Eventually, you just don't hear the trains anymore. Has our empathy become so callous that we just don't care? Do we just turn a blind eye so we don't have to deal with the heartbreak? For a long time, I didn't care if God was real or not. I just knew religion had to end. I can't tolerate the intolerable anymore. I can't respect the ridiculous anymore. And most of all, I won't be silent anymore. Thanks, Seth, for joining me in not being silent anymore. Regards, Luca. Luca, thank you very much for the message and a great letter. I've got Kumsir on Skype. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. What's your name?
My name's Chris, Seth. How are you?
I'm well, Chris. Thanks for calling the show. It's a freestyle broadcast tonight, so what do you want to talk about?
Oh, so many things, Seth. I've been meaning to call into your last couple of shows. I've not been able to do so. I'm actually a mental health survivor, suicide attempt survivor, so your mental health show was deeply interesting. One thing that struck me, I used to be a Christian, and I was looking back today at a video that's aimed at Christians on how to help people with depression. And one thing that struck me was that the things that they were listing had absolutely nothing to do with their religion. At one point, the speaker says, what advice would I give to a Christian friend? It's that I don't need the Bible. And it just struck me very much that religion tries to get its paws into the mental health debate when it's actually doing more harm than good.
Well, explain it to me. Wait a minute. They were a religious institution that was offering help to people who suffer from depression, but they were saying that they could overcome depression without the Bible?
Yeah, it's not, I don't know the institution. It's from a series of videos basically around the topic of helping the depressed Christian. And the speaker is a Christian writer called Adrian Plass. He's a British writer, and he's very entertaining. But he says, you don't need the Bible, you just need a friend. So he's actually unwittingly throwing out his religion in order to help his people who may be depressed, which I thought was very interesting.
Don't call on the most powerful being in all of the cosmos to assist you. No, just go grab a buddy and talk it out. It's just very conspicuous, isn't it?
It is. But this is the thing that I still have many religious friends, and I think they find it disquieting that religion plays no healing role for me. But what they actually fail to realize is that essentially when you're depressed, invoking prayer is pretty much praying to literally an imaginary friend. And one of the things when you're depressed, you feel like the scales have been lifted from your eyes, and so you can see it for the nonsense that it is. It's quite peculiar. It's something that I think is unique to mental illness. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for doing that show. It was very interesting.
How are you doing now? I mean, you doing all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I actually speak on behalf of a couple of mental health organisations here in the UK. So yes, I would say that I'm pretty well-adjusted at this point.
Well, sometimes I think it helps, it helps to help others.
Exactly.
Like you are, I'm struck by how the church seems to have its claws out for the vulnerable. They have programs just for addiction recovery. They have programs just for those who are depressed. They have programs for those who are divorcees, right? They find people at their weak moment and say, well, hey, come here. We'll be a safe place. We love you. I heard Dr. Prothero call this love bombing is kind of what they do, and they bring them in their weak moments, and you've probably seen a lot of that as well, huh?
Yes. It's marketing in its purest form. It's very, very interesting. I remember you've quoted a guest you've had on in the past saying that all she learned from from marketing she learned in the church, and it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
But they are at once very, very, you have the love bombing element, but once you actually open up to Christians, I find, about mental health, they get very, very defensive and very, very unnerved. I'm actually a member of a gospel choir. I'm openly atheist. I'm in Britain, so that's allowed. It's. I think if I were on your side of the pond, it would be a bit more difficult. But in this gospel choir, they are sometimes quite nervous about talking about mental health, despite professing all this love and compassion. So it's curious.
Do you do it because you just love the music, or what does that exactly do for you?
Oh, the music gets me high. Singing gets me high. It's curious. I used to think that it was God speaking to me through the music. I used to think that it brought me to this higher spiritual plane, and of course it does. But there's no religion attached, because I sing in all kinds of other circumstances as well. And when I realized I was getting the same high from other music that wasn't religious, you start to think, oh, hang on.
Yeah.
This is just brain chemistry. And it's marvelous brain chemistry, but there's no God particle attached. I'm addicted to whatever the effects of making music are. It's bloody marvelous, to be honest.
Yeah, I buy that. Look, I think Robert M. Price, he's an author and educator, and And even he goes to church sometimes just because the communal act of enjoying music together, even worship music, he enjoys. He knows, his rational brain the entire time knows that there's not a real deity receiving my worship, but I enjoy the act of doing it. I enjoy singing with other people. I enjoy many of the songs themselves. And so, if that works for you, don't let me pry too deeply into your personal life, Chris, but when you were suffering from, severe depression, were you an atheist at that time? You non-believer?
I've wavered in and out over a 7 or 8 year period. So at points I think when I did consider it from a religious point of view, because I actually attempted suicide, I took the view that God would not blame me. But it wasn't something that I considered too deeply. I wasn't in a mental state to do so.
Where I'm going, I think, is where people looking at you and saying you are not committed enough to God or Jesus. That's why there's no joy in your life. You're not doing religious belief correctly, or you've strayed too far from God. Did you hear any of that kind of talk?
I didn't hear that, but all I would say about that is that depression can make you a very good actor. So people may not have known.
Yeah.
Depression can make you a very good actor. So you're not always conscious of what other people are thinking about you, and they're not always conscious of where you're actually mentally at. So my honest answer is I don't know. Yeah. If I get into a low space and my Christian friends are aware, they tend to think that it's sort of, the devil's getting to me. That's the line of thinking that seems to be most prevalent.
Well, I'm glad you're doing well. And honestly, you're a great communicator. I'm glad there's a rationalist out there who's speaking and encouraging others in this very difficult and complex topic. So thank you for what you do, my friend, and thanks for being a part of this community. It means a whole lot.
Thank you very much, Seth. Keep doing what you're doing.
All right. Take care of yourself.
Cheers, fella. Bye.
I was nervous when we scheduled the Skeptics and Mental Health episode, which aired a couple of weeks ago, because it's such a sticky topic. I wanted to make sure that it was treated respectfully. And when the show was over, I came away thinking that this is probably in one of the top 5 shows that I'm most proud of, because it seems to genuinely help people. Things like depression and forms of mental illness seem to touch so many lives out there on so many levels, and people aching for a rational eye looking at the problem instead of all this God speak, all of this bumper sticker theology that people are throwing at a problem that deserves so much more. And if you haven't heard the broadcast, it's just a real joy, I think, to not because I'm the host, but because I'm smart enough to bring in guests who are experts on the subject. And the words that came out of their mouths just honestly drove that show way over the fence and beyond. And that happened a couple weeks ago, so if you get a chance, look it up. It's called Skepticism and Mental Health. Ricardo sent a message. He said, I know this doesn't rank high on the list of stuff that's wrong in the world, but it's been bothering me for a few weeks. Here's my question. Should we, as a scientific-minded community, hold our science-minded actors to a higher standard of scientific accuracy in their work as actors? A specific example that's been bothering me is the film Lucy, that hinges on the oft-quoted but highly unscientific notion that we only use 10% of our brain, and the actor involved would be scientific enthusiasts and presenter Mr. Morgan Freeman. What do you think? Regards, Ricardo. Well, I don't think we can hold the bar of expectation all that high when it comes to Hollywood. Hollywood's about the buck, and they are going to be pandering to the lowest common denominator. This, in my opinion, is the only thing that explains the popularity of anything Michael Bay produces. I mean, and I'm kind of a movie guy. I love the movies. I'm not hugely hardcore, but I am one of the guys that if you're playing movie trivia or movie Trivial Pursuit, to have me on your team might work, because I can recall a lot of that stuff just because I just love the movies. But when I watch something in the theater, I realize, just stupid stuff. Like anytime someone administers a vaccine, have you noticed that the liquid inside the syringe has to be some kind of a neon blue or neon yellow concoction? And whatever the antidote is going to be, it would probably be some kind of clear liquid. It just looked like medicine. It looked like anything, The other thing that drives me crazy is any espionage films. When they show them, I saw this in Silence of the Lambs, actually, the other day, too. It was when Dr. Chilton was secretly recording the conversations between Clarice Starling and Dr. Hannibal Lecter. And they showed the tape recorder that he had been using to record the conversations. And it is right out of the 1960s. It's a little handheld thing with 2 reels and actual tape on it. Now, I realize that the film was released in, 1991? But even then, it was archaic technology. And if you see how fast the reels are spinning, anyone who does audio or video for a living understands that he had about 6 minutes of recording time. It's just the least practical. The tape is exposed to the elements. It can easily slip out of the guides. It can get bound up or broken. I mean, the unit itself makes no sense. And they still use it in films all the time when they show someone recording secret audio of someone else. The worst is when they have somebody who's having a clandestine conversation and they have it stuck in a pocket somewhere. There's no way that thing is going to run when you've got it jammed into your coat pocket. It's just crap. It's a digital recorder. You can get 15 hours of high-def audio out of it. Next time you see a spy movie and somebody's recording somebody in a conversation, look at the tape recorder they use. God, it just makes me crazy. I'm fascinated, though, by stuff like that. And Hollywood's never done science well. What was that movie with Val Kilmer and Elizabeth Shue, the young lady from the Karate Kid movie? And she had somehow discovered this secret to cold fusion. And you just take one look at her and you're completely unconvinced. You're like, you were in Karate Kid. You didn't discover the secret to cold fusion, There's also another side to that. It's the stuff that was science fiction in film that we now do every day. And the 007 films are a great example of that. Stuff that used to be pie in the sky, advanced government level technology that we would never use. Now it's just it's just so common we don't even think about it. GPS, bulletproof glass, those propulsion jetpacks or whatever for scuba divers. Oh yeah, that was awesome back in the 60s. Now people use them all the time. Car phones. You know what I'm saying? Car phones used to be unheard of. That's James Bond stuff. Fingerprint scanners. All the spy cameras, like the stuff they put in the ink pens and in rings and jewelry and stuff, that stuff's everywhere. Jetpacks. Even the Star Trek communicator, Wrath of Khan, was on a few weeks ago. One of my favorite films of all time. They pull out those big-ass communicators. And I'm like, you know how trite those things look in the wake of the modern-day cell phone? It's just this, it was a brick. It was just so big. And all it does is what? Audio? There's no video? There's no GPS? You can't check your email? Of course, Wrath of Khan released in 1980. What was that? 1982? 3? Something like that? So I guess they can be excused. Nolan sent a message and said, I recently visited a chiropractor on the advice of my mother. The chiropractor took x-rays of me standing up and looked at them. He diagnosed me with an 11-degree idiopathic scoliosis. I obviously wanted a second opinion, and I told this to him. The first thing he did was to start erasing the marks he put on the x-rays until I stopped him, telling him that his marks were relevant. The actual doctor diagnosed me with a kidney infection and prescribed me a 14-day course of antibiotics. I feel much better now. If you ever get the chance, look up the validity of chiropractic medicine. I know that chiropractic medicine can help with some problems, and many people benefit from it, but the chiropractor actively discouraged me from seeking treatment elsewhere. If I'd listened to him, I wonder what would have happened to me. Nolan, thanks for the message. We talked to the Skepdoc a while back. What was the name of that show? A World Full of Woo? And she took a really hard line on chiropractic. I think, in her words, I'd have to go back and listen to the show, but she said that I think the only documented or verifiable benefit that chiropractic has supposedly brought is the relief of lower back pain. But a lot of the other claims that are made by chiropractors, and those claims can range from anything, from my allergies are gone or something else. There's apparently no scientific evidence to support that, or at least no quote-unquote proof to support that. I don't know, I'd welcome somebody's input if you have had an experience with a chiropractor. That's a very touchy subject, but it might be something we cover again because so many people do seek treatment with a chiropractor. Is there real science to it? Is it a valid form of medicine, or is a lot of it just trumped up claims under the guise of medicine when it really is nothing of the kind? So that's probably a whole other kind of show and a whole other can of worms that I'm not prepared to open tonight, okay? Area code 717. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hey, this is Jacob.
Jacob, thanks for waiting. What do you have for us tonight?
Well, I just wanted to say you were talking a little bit about refuting claims that are just so old.
Yeah.
But I still think it's worth doing because, like, 2 years ago, I was still a believer, and I just stumbled across a video by Penn Jillette one night where he really challenged the ideas that kind of the doubts I already had but was afraid to face. And he just kind of pulled them up and shoved them straight into my face.
So if I or somebody does a rebuttal to a Josh Feuerstein type, even though we know there's no way he's listening and he's probably fame-seeking anyway, right? You think it's worth the time to go ahead and put the refutation out?
Yeah, because, you know, a lot of people probably won't read the refutations out there, but it will be helpful to have more of them out there so that people, more out there so that they maybe will stumble across them, maybe read them. Well, at least for me, it's one thing I ran into recently was earlier this year, somebody threw in a letter to the editor. It was in the wake of the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate, where the person was criticizing Bill Nye, saying there's all kinds of evidence for the Bible. And I was reading their arguments, and it was essentially a bullet point argument out of the book Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell. And I had actually already read that apologetic, and I knew all the refutations for it. So I put out a counter letter in the paper explaining exactly what was wrong with it, with all these claims they were making. And really, a week or two later, I had somebody who knew me, who was a Catholic, came up to me and said, you know, at my age, I should really know what I believe. I think even though it's maybe tired old claims, there's still people who maybe haven't seen the refutation, and I think having more of them out there helps people run across them.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's got merit, man. I appreciate your perspective. All right. Thanks for calling the show, my friend. Take care of yourself. Oop, did I lose him? I think I just lost him. Sorry, man. I think the challenge that I have, and I think one of the rebuttals that I'd seen on YouTube was something along the lines of, look at how much humankind does not know. Feuerstein's used this when so many others use a version of it. How can you claim to have any real knowledge about anything? We are just insects. I think to myself, how much we don't know is not an argument for or against God. Science understands how much we have to learn. But I don't think we check out of the conversation simply because we know there are things we don't yet know. I also think science is a lot more honest about what we don't yet know than religion is. Remember, religion says we have the answer, and they're talking about the answer with a capital A. That also gives them, in many cases, the excuse to check out of all of the other questions. Why explore geology? We know who created the earth. Why explore the cosmos? We know who created the cosmos. You know, why worry about testing and retesting and even enhancing dating methods on fossils? We know where the dinosaurs came from. They were in the Garden of Eden, those types of things. It's an excuse to check out of the conversation because you already have the answer. And then they say that atheists are arrogant, which is crazy. You know, those of us who understand our place in the cosmos actually have a tremendous humility, knowing our lives are temporary, that we are a blip upon a blip inside 100 billion galaxies, and that no one's going to remember us. The universe doesn't care that we exist, and the only life purpose that we have is the life purpose we create for ourselves. That's not a position of arrogance. It's a position of humility. To be arrogant is to say that you are an adopted child of a divine king. The most powerful creature in the universe has hand-selected you to be their child, and he loves you so much he's going to build you an awesome mansion. You guys are going to hang out together in a special happy city that he's building just for you. That's arrogance. Makes me crazy. Had a message in from Mike. It's a little bit too long to read the entirety of this one on the air, but I'll get to part of it for you. He said, I'm a longtime listener. I've met you in person once. This is my first email to you. Your announcement of the next show being a freestyle episode is the perfect opportunity for me to construct and fire off this message I've actually been meaning to send for a little while. You're a nice guy. There is, it seems, something of a movement in certain parts of atheism to be nicer. We have Hemant Mehta, the friendly atheist. We have other podcasts and shows that go out of their way to put on a warm, welcoming face to those who still believe. The consensus seems to be that God followers have a general preconceived notion of atheists being an angry, nasty bunch. And many are trying to turn that around and show these people that we can be just as nice as they are. An admirable enough endeavor, I'm sure, but I am not a nice guy. I'm a misanthrope. The general definition of misanthropy is someone who hates people, someone who despises mankind. It usually describes someone who's antisocial and is irritated by the presence of other human beings. Florence King, in her book, With Charity Toward None, A Fond Look at Misanthropy, describes it as someone who doesn't suffer fools and likes to see fools suffer. In the same book, she states that if ever you meet someone who cannot understand why solitary confinement is considered punishment, you've met a misanthrope. This absolutely describes me. I believe that my psychological need for interaction with others is so weak I could probably go for years on end on a desert island without feeling any significant form of loneliness, and I lament that I cannot practically put this idea to the test. I thrive in solitude. As Miss King makes clear, misanthropes are born, not made. I've been this way for as long as I can remember. An angsty teenager who's going through a rebellious phase where they're pissed off at the whole world is not a true misanthrope. At least we won't be able to tell if they are until they're well out of puberty. Someone saddened and dismayed at the atrocities committed by mankind cannot be considered a misanthrope for this reason alone, though such facts would help to reinforce their misanthropy were it actually there. They have to dislike people on a basic, deeper, personal level. When over 90% of pop culture incites nausea, when you find it an annoyance to return the greetings of strangers or even coworkers when you actually give your honest opinion when it's asked for, then we are in the realm of the real thing. One does not choose to be a misanthrope any more than one chooses to be straight or gay. And just like sexuality, misanthropy exists on a sliding scale. It may surprise you to learn that I donate to charities, including those that you have championed. It may also surprise you to hear that I enjoy attending conferences and conventions of different types, from local atheist to skeptic events all the way up to the San Diego Comic-Con, with its 126,000 plus attendees. I feel no cognitive dissonance here. Actually, the bigger the event, the less personal it tends to be. Misanthropy is not a philosophy. It's not a doctrine that I strive to remain true to. It is what I am. There may be times when my participation in the items thus outlined causes me irritation, but these instances tend to occur less frequently than you might assume. I've even met some people unaware of my general misanthropy who have considered me sweet, if only they knew. The relationship that misanthropy has with atheism and skepticism is very similar to the relationship homosexuality has with the same. One does not require the other. Indeed, as you yourself are evident, I think it's fair to assume most atheists and skeptics are not misanthropes. It does, however, remove burdens of guilt that were put upon me during my religious life for being this way. I can remember attending youth groups and feeling some amount of panic that I couldn't make myself feel the things I was told Jesus wanted me to feel. I could not turn the other cheek. I could not love my neighbor as myself, and I sure as hell couldn't love my enemies. I thought I was screwed. Now I say, screw that. And he goes on to list some famous misanthropes. He lists the amazing atheist, Johnny Rotten, lead singer for the Sex Pistols, And the brilliant author Harlan Ellison, in fact, he asked if I could get an interview with Harlan Ellison on the radio. Geez, I don't know. He'd be like going to the moon. I was aware of his work back when he was writing for the original Trek, when he wrote, I think, was it City on the Edge of Forever? And he wrote the original teleplay for that. So, I don't really know where to go with that, Mike. There were a few things that I do want to address. I don't know that those of us who are nice people, who love people, who demonstrate or seek to demonstrate compassion and empathy are doing so because we are seeking to compensate for the angrier, edgier side of the movement. It's not like I'm trying to tip the balance one way or the other. I do see that there's a need. I think that people are hungry for a brand of skepticism that can be strong, but it doesn't treat all religious people as if they are, any number of insults that they might pull out of their pocket to throw out. I don't think much can come of that. It's like my response to Feuerstein. I mean, yeah, there's a couple of edgy lines in there, but the truth is it was a relatively compassionate approach. And in my opinion, mostly, I would hope, a fact-based approach, an evidence-based approach to specific religious claims. It didn't tell Josh he was an idiot. What it did was it addressed the claims that he had made and spoke about some specific concerns I had that he may be looking for fame more than he is looking for Jesus. I don't know that we will change things by being toxic to others. And it sounds like in your case, change may not be the end zone. Maybe making the point is for you enough. For me, I feel like I want to change minds. I want to get people thinking. I want people to get me thinking. I want to help blow some fresh air through the cobwebs and allow the opportunity for other people to do that for me. We continue to challenge each other. We continue to explore and discover the world together. Every day is an opportunity to learn something. What is it Matt Dillahunty says? I want to believe as few false things and as many true things as possible. Well, I don't think you do that in a vacuum. I think we have to sharpen each other. And so I don't think I'm trying to compensate for something someone else is doing. I think this is just kind of how I roll. And, I'm hoping people will go there and respond to it. And many have. Many come up to me and they'll say, look, thank you for not leading with venom. Thank you for not being nothing but F-bombs and insults. Thank you for seeing people, atheist and religious person alike, in 3 dimensions. I'm not always great at it, but it's something that I've made a point to try to do, because quite often the issues that we face are much more complex than these one-dimensional sort of caricatures that we throw at them. And so that's sort of what motivates me. It's not necessarily just that I think you'll attract more bees with honey. It's not quite that simple. But I don't think I want to walk into a room and tell everybody who disagrees with me that they're an idiot and then expect that they might listen to anything afterwards that I have to say. And I want people listening, and I want the opportunity to listen to them. And I think that means we're having discourse, not just shouting at each other, And as far as you're concerned, I'm fascinated. If, being a relatively isolated guy is something that works for you and you find genuine fulfillment in that way, I don't understand it. I don't really get it. I don't need to get it. My hope for you would be a fulfilled life, whatever that means. So if it means isolation, then good for you. Part of me mourns and grieves that a little bit because I myself think that life is to be shared. But not everybody's like me, man. So whatever, however you roll, whatever scratches that itch for you, whatever fulfills you, whatever fills your heart up, whatever gives you joy, whatever it is that floats your boat, man, just do that. And all my best. And thank you so much for being a part of the listening audience. It means a lot. One final message tonight from Les. He said this: I just listened to your latest show and heard that the next one was Anything Goes. On August the 10th, my father-in-law passed away after a stroke in October that revealed he had a brain tumor as well as spots on his lungs. The last 10 months of his life, he was confined to a bed in his living room until his body finally wore out. I'd like to share a little about him because he was a huge part of my realizing religion is not necessary to be a moral person. While he did go to church up until college, he definitely was not a believer for the almost 18 years I knew him. He wasn't outspoken about his beliefs, and religion was never discussed when my wife was a child. He just raised his kids how to think for themselves and that all people deserve respect. As far as I know, he never drank or used drugs recreationally, and he never smoked. He didn't do these things just because he didn't care for them. I'd be very shocked to hear that he ever cheated on either one of his wives. Michelle's mom died in 2004. He also never used profanity, not because he thought it made you a bad person, but as an English teacher for 35 years, he believed it was improper grammar. When I began the process of coming out of religion, I began to really notice this about him. I also noticed that most of the Christians I know, including myself, did a lot of these things that the church taught against. I couldn't wrap my head around the idea that a man that loved his family, worked hard, and would never do anything to hurt anyone could burn in hell. While my own father, who's pretty much an alcoholic, I know he's cheated on my mom and cusses in most sentences, and he gets to go to heaven. Don't get me wrong, I love my father, and he's always been there for me. It's just that I couldn't stop thinking about how stupid this was. For most of the time I knew my father-in-law, we disagreed about religion. It was just something we didn't talk about. I don't want to give the impression he was a saint now that he's dead. He definitely had his moments, as we all do. I'm just glad I did get to know him, and the result that he and his daughter had on my life. Without them, there's a very good chance I would still be believing in talking snakes and worldwide floods. I would also like to add that your show was the first place I found I could go when I came out as an atheist. It really helped me to know that I wasn't crazy nor alone. Thank you. Les, thanks for a great letter. I actually did a show a while back called You're Not Alone and You're Not Crazy. And if anyone within the sound of my voice is frustrated and discouraged in your skepticism in the wake of the sort of huge religious tide that's all around us, cue that show up and spend 90 minutes with me. It is my hope that you will leave encouraged. Thank you so much for being a part of tonight's broadcast. Now that the show is over, don't forget to go to naturebox.com/thinkingatheist to sign up and get your free sampler box of great tasting and healthy snacks like barbecue kettle kernels and over 100 other choices. It's naturebox.com/thinkingatheist. And I'll see you next time on the Thinking Atheist Radio Podcast. Take care.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.